remember when I set up my first franchise. It was back in around about 2011, and the franchise was based around the mobile app industry. And I set up the franchise because we'd come up with a product that we'd figured out how to create a business selling mobile apps, and we'd done it in two areas and seen great success. And it was an awesome product based around technology, and it was very unique in the marketplace. However, I didn't know anything about franchising, but it was really obvious to me and my team that this would have made a fantastic franchise, and it could roll out geographically, area by area in the UK. But because I was so new to franchising, I didn't know much about it at all. I recruited some franchise consultants to help structure the franchise, help me with all the legals, and just really guide me. And I did a deal so that they would assist with the selling and then with the management of the franchisees thereafter. And so it was that I started my first franchise business. And as a great business model that it was, we ended up selling a lot of franchises in a lot of areas. And it turns out we were really good at selling franchises, and the franchise consultants that we'd hired initially were supposed to do the selling of the franchises, but we ended up doing it ourselves because it turned out it was really popular. And so we let the franchise consultants manage the franchisees thereafter so that we could focus on the product and selling more areas and getting the setup done and the launch and all of that kind of stuff. And for the first few months, in fact, first year, it was absolutely brilliant. We sold loads of franchises and really saw some great success. And we actually had our first really successful franchisees as well. They were doing what we told them and worked out really, really well. However, we were also having some franchisees that were really struggling, that weren't selling and were starting to complain. And the consultants that we hired were working really hard to try and support them using the model and applying the process, and still weren't seeing success. And this was the width and breadth of the country. And I was hearing all sorts of things like, oh, well, this franchise doesn't work in my area, or, you know, the people in this area don't seem to want to buy the product and it's never going to work, and the technology isn't, you know, successful, or it's not ready. And so I had this real different or differing opinions from all these different people all over the place. And yet still we've got some franchises in really random area that are absolutely smashing it. And so this was really, really confusing. And so what happened was, me and my sales director decided what we're going to do is we're going to find out for ourselves what's really going on here, because we were getting all the information secondhand from the consultants. And we're going to do a road trip all the way around the UK. And we started by hiring a car, and we drove right up all the way to the very top, Aberdeen, stopping off on the way, speaking to our franchisees in different places, some of whom were successful and some of whom weren't, to try and figure out what was the issue, what was causing the problem. And it was the weirdest education in business I think I've ever had. It was a real education in human nature. The successful franchisees, as expected, were following the formula as dictated by us, as we'd proven it in the areas, going great guns, making really good money, lots of happy customers, excited by the prospect, big plans for development more, looking at buying other areas from us, and absolutely loving what it was that we'd done. And then when we go and see the guys that weren't successful, they simply weren't following the recipe that we'd provided in the franchise agreement and in the training that we gave, which was very thorough, to the extent that with the franchisees that weren't successful, we actually went out and did the sales presentation and the process with them to show them specifically how to do it and made sales for them, and then said, now you know what you're doing. Sorry if it was any misunderstanding, crack on and do that. And what happened when we left? They still didn't find success. They still didn't apply the formula. They still let whatever the reasons were get in the way of their success. And so this is where I found out all about franchising and franchisees. This is where I started to really dig under the bonnet. And the first thing I did, I went to the franchise consultants, the so-called experts, to say to them, you know, we've got like I guess it was around about a 40% success rate, something like that, out of the 100% that we'd sold, which for me was absolutely horrendous. It was just, you know, we had this was a major problem, and they were flabbergasted too. They couldn't understand why it wasn't working the way it was supposed to, while we hadn't got, you know, at least 90% success rate. So then I started calling up and networking with other franchisees, and this is where I had the shock of my life. Franchisors, is other people that were running franchise businesses. This is where I got the shock of my life. This is where I found out that our statistics were actually quite normal, that our statistics were actually pretty good, even compared to franchises where people spend tens and tens of thousands of dollars or pounds to set up, sometimes hundreds of thousands. And that it's absolutely normal for a franchisee to spend loads of money on their franchise and then not follow the recipe, not follow the formula, and end up not being successful or as successful as they could be, and in fact failing. And I found this absolutely unbelievable, because as an entrepreneur myself, understanding business, having learnt the hard way, to not follow a recipe that was already proven seemed like madness. And yet, that's the truth of it. That is the truth of it. And so, when I came to set up Blam, the Blam Partnership Program, it was based on the knowledge that even though you can give somebody the absolute recipe for success, they're not necessarily going to follow it. And it was my obligation to do everything that I could to understand that and try and help people that found it difficult helping themselves. And so our model now is very much based on being as flexible as possible to try and accommodate as broad a spectrum of people as possible to help them find success, so that we can be the adaptive franchisor that helps as many people as possible get to where they need to be. Because people, whether we like it or not, will think they know better, or will have things that crop up in their life that they feel like are more important than running their business. They will let life get in the way. There's 101 reasons stroke excuses that people have as to why they don't follow the recipe or the formula to success. And our job is to find a way of helping them get around that and helping them get past it. Because the success of a franchise is based on following a proven formula. So if you are looking at buying a franchise and you are looking to find one that is a good fit for you, bear in mind the story that I've just told you, because it doesn't matter what franchise you look at, they are going to have had failures. The question is, are those failures because of the poor training and support from the franchisor, or is it purely that it's just the normal ratio that you get some people that don't follow the formula? So my advice is, it's much more important to speak to successful franchisees rather than unsuccessful ones. If you get to speak to an unsuccessful one, you've got to try and figure out, because they will always blame the franchisor. Now, very rarely will they admit it's their own fault if they're not successful, but you've got to figure out, is it because they haven't had the right support, they haven't been given the right formula, they haven't been given the right recipe? But when you speak to the successful franchisees, the same thing applies. Are they successful because they've applied the formula verbatim as it was given to them by the franchisor, or have they found another way of doing it and that's what's got the success? And these are the key things. So just because a franchisor has got failures doesn't mean they're a bad franchise. It's the successful ones that are the important ones. Have they followed the formula as dictated by the franchisor, and is that what's got them success? And based on my knowledge of running previous franchises, that's the way I try and apply to Blam. Is we're always looking for, as successful partners, what is it that they are doing to find success? Are they following our formula verbatim? Are there slight variables that means that we can then tell the other franchisees, this guy's doing this, that guy's doing that, and that's getting slightly better results? Because one of the massive benefits of having a franchise is that group learning. You know, you can analyze what other people are doing, and as people become successful and more experienced and they start to experiment a little bit with their sales and their model, do they try and find ways of being more efficient and effective? Do they find better ways? Sometimes they'll find ways that make it a little bit worse, and we have to bring them back to the formula that we know definitely works. And sometimes, you know, we might find enhancements. And we're always doing little tests with our top franchisees to see if we can find more efficient ways of doing things. And when we do, we then roll it out to the whole group and let people follow it. But without exception, particularly with the Blam franchise, and I imagine it's the same with lots of other franchises, the guys that don't find success, they just don't follow the formula verbatim, or they didn't follow it for long enough. A lot of people give up too soon before they find success, and perseverance does prevail in business. It's a really key part of being successful in business. So I hope that's helpful. I hope that's a bit of an eye-opener, like it was to me when I found out that human nature will sabotage your business, the human nature that we're all born with. But listen to your franchisor. They've got a recipe that is proven. That's why they're a franchise. And if you follow it verbatim with persistence and perseverance, it's highly unlikely that you're not going to find success. And always look at those successful franchisees. What is it that they're doing that's different from the ones that aren't successful? And I'll bet you, in nearly 100% of the time, it's because they're following the formula that they've been given. Hope you find this interesting. You want to find out more about Blam or franchising in general, please like, subscribe. If you want me to talk about any other subjects in franchising, then let me know, and I'll see you on the next one.